I don't know if I just, if I don't reveal all my true desires and everything like that, but it's difficult to buy for me. In part, I think because I'm a little bit of a minimalist. I don't know if you guys know about that movement and everything like that, but I try to, and it's not necessarily a religious thing, it's just for me personally, I like living with less as opposed to more, and I like to engage in experiences and things like that. And so I find that some of my friends are like, that's great, Josh, but we actually really want to buy you something for Christmas, so what are you going to do? And what was funny was, last year, I got a gift from somebody that was probably the best gift I had ever received, and I never asked for it. It's this FC Barcelona jersey, okay? Now, I don't know about you guys, but this is the reason why it meant so much to me. Number one, I played soccer all growing up, and I played at a high level, and I really love soccer. And then, in addition to that, whenever I go and travel to another place, whether it be another city or another country or something like that, I always try to get a jersey from that particular location. It's sort of the thing that I collect. I collect jerseys. I have quite a few of them. And so I got this, and this is actually my favorite team. And I want you to know I'm not on the bandwagon for FC Barcelona because they're actually really good right now. But like I liked them back in the late 80s and early 90s, back when they had other players that were famous back then. And so when I got this jersey, I almost cried. And what was crazy about it is I didn't even know that I wanted this jersey. It was one of those things, I didn't put it on my window, like I didn't want a jersey, like it's okay, I don't need that. But when I received it, I don't cry over Christmas presents, but I almost cried then. It was so amazing because it hit a part of my soul that I didn't realize was there. I know that sounds weird, but it was just like, that was an amazing gift. And I didn't even ask for it, and you knew it, and it was awesome. The question that I have for you today is, in a similar vein, what do you think would make heaven happiest? Just like this jersey made me incredibly happy, almost to the point of tears, my question to you is this: what makes heaven happiest? If we had a Christmas list for Jesus, what would you include in that Christmas list? If you had a Christmas list for all the angels in heaven, what would be included on that Christmas list? That's what we're going to be looking at today, with the big question saying, what makes heaven happiest? What makes heaven happiest? If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up to Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. If you're having trouble finding it, it's right behind Luke chapter 14. And so here we are, and this is how it starts. And you guys have heard this. If you've been in church for 5 years, 10 years, you guys have heard these passages before. But we get a glimpse into the heart of God. We get a glimpse into the heart of eternity. We get a glimpse into the heart of heaven and what their deepest desires are. And so that we can align our hearts with heaven's heart. Right? So this is how it starts. This is what starting in verse 1, and it's going to be a lot of reading today. We're going to go through the entire chapter, but just hold on tight. It says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. It's interesting. Tax collectors and notorious sinners. Not just the regular sinners, right? Certainly not the high and holy people, but not just the regular sinners that, only go to temple once a month, right? We're talking about the notorious sinners. Like when you look at them, oh, that's Mary. That's Bob. I know about Bob, right? And we know all the notorious things. Unfortunately, a lot of these people are running for office right now. So, but anyway, we move on, right? I digress. Verse 2, let's get back into the word. This made the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with him. If you're following in your notes, these are the first few things that we learn about verses 1 and 2. Number one, tax collectors. They were these Jews These Israelites who worked for Rome, and Rome was the enemy, just so you know. When the Messiah was, when they were praying for the Messiah to come, they were praying for this social and religious and this social and political leader who was going to usurp Rome's authority and establish Israel once again as a mighty nation. And so when Jews start working for Rome, they're automatically labeled what? Traitors. And so when Jews saw other Jews working for Rome, they're like, that stinking traitor. And not only that, this is what they did. They took the money, so they were tax collectors from Jews for Rome. So they took the money from their own people, and then they kept a percentage for themselves. So in the midst of saying, you owe Rome 20%, they would give Rome 10, they would keep 10 themselves. Those are just numbers that I picked out of the sky, but you get the idea. So those were tax collectors. And then these sinners, these immoral and outcasts, you get an idea of maybe some of the things that they had done. Maybe burglars, maybe sexually immoral people, maybe people that just, they also maybe had some physical disabilities because they believed at that point in time that these people who had physical disabilities, they were being cursed by God for doing something, either themselves or somebody before them, their parents or their grandparents. And so these people were outcasts. And then they asked this question of Jesus, or they asked this question about Jesus. How can Jesus hang out with these sinners? How can Jesus spend time with these people? For two reasons. Number one, because if Jesus himself was Messiah, if Jesus himself was from God or God himself, then he would probably be teaching the religious leaders, because that's the high level that he was at, and that's the high level that they would be at. Number two, if you remember back, a main theme that they had in the Old Testament was, do not associate with sinners. And part of the reason for that is because immorality would get into your life too. And we saw that in the life of Solomon. He married a lot of women from different places, and their influences, their religious influences, and they started worshiping their gods, and they worshiped their gods, and they brought them into Solomon's life. And what did Solomon do? He started worshiping those gods. And so he realized that, God realized that this was going to be an influence. And so they're looking at Jesus and saying, why are you hanging out with these people who can influence you negatively? And then how can you hang out with these people who are swarthy, who don't deserve your presence? Why are you doing this? Why are you hanging out with them? And then Jesus says this, verse 3. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep, and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and his neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep. In the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed. See, this is what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you guys a couple of analogies because I want you to put yourself in God's shoes. Those are big shoes to fill. He's not saying become God, but he's saying put yourself in God's shoes for a second. This is what makes heaven happy. And then he gives this analogy of a shepherd, and everybody knows in this culture that if you have 99, or if you have 100 sheep and one goes astray, this is what you're going to do. You're going to shepherd all your sheep into one area. Maybe you have a shepherd friend who's going to watch your sheep, and then you're going to go after that one. And you're going to go after it, and you are going to find it. It doesn't matter if it takes a couple of minutes. It doesn't matter if it takes a couple of hours. It doesn't matter if it takes a day or two. You are going to find that sheep. Just shepherd culture. A hired hand wouldn't go after it, but a good shepherd, he would. And then when he comes back, this is what he's going to do. Verse 5, he says, and when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. He will proclaim victory because that lost sheep was found. And when he arrives, he will call together his friends and his neighbors, saying, rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep. In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. When the shepherd comes back and he talks to his friends, is he going to talk about the 99 who are faithful? No. He's going to talk about the one who strayed away. Now, sheep, they stray away for a variety of different reasons. Number one, because they're rebellious, all right? Sometimes sheep are rebellious and they rebel against the shepherd. But other times, they just get distracted or they get deceived. And don't we get that way sometimes? So Jesus is opening up the reality, because sometimes when we look at these tax collectors and we look at these sinners, we think, oh, they have earned their due wages. They're rejected by Jewish society because they deserve it. But here's Jesus saying, realize that a sheep, yeah, they can go off on their own because of their own stubbornness. But there are times when they just get off their way. But when a shepherd comes back, he's going to be rejoicing. He's going to be sharing stories. Have you ever shared a story with somebody about how you lost something but then gained it back? Do you ever tell people about your day? How do you tell, like, when someone asks me about my day and I say I had lunch, that's not a big deal because I brought my lunch. My lunch happened to be in the refrigerator and I pulled it out and I ate it. There's nothing significant about that. But there is something significant about the fact that, oh, I forgot my lunch because I was busy getting out of the house because I was late, and and then I had to find something, and I didn't have any money on me, but then all of a sudden, like, a friend invited me to lunch, and he's like, hey, you want to have lunch? I'll pay for it. And I'm like, that's awesome. That makes a great story, doesn't it? The boring, mundane story of, I had my lunch, I put it in the refrigerator, I got it out, and I cooked it, and I ate it, there's nothing there. But heaven is excited when they see a lost sheep and they're able to find it and bring it back, because there's an adventure to that, because that sheep is worth something to the shepherd. And that sinner is worth something to God. It continues on. It says the parable of the lost coin, verse 8, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? Just to add some background to this first, all right? Don't think of just a person who's cleaning their house. Think of a widow. Think of a widow who only has 10 silver coins. She has no family to back her up financially. And so all she has are these 10 silver coins. And once she runs out, she runs out. She's at the mercy of the culture around her. She will have to beg. She'll have to ask for relatives for other things, or friends or neighbors, because she doesn't have anybody, or she doesn't have anything to support herself. And so she has these 10 silver coins, and she loses one. That's a big deal. Continues on. And when she finds it, she will call out to her friends and neighbors and say, oh my gosh, rejoice with me because I have found my lost coin. In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. Have you ever had those moments either at work or at home or wherever the situation is where you know you lost something and you needed it? The girl that I'm dating right now, her parents live in Mexico, and her mom, the night before she was going to fly here 2 weeks ago, lost her passport. And not only lost her passport, but also lost her visa. I don't know if you know this, but like in order to get back from Mexico into the United States for a particular amount of time, you have to have a visa and everything like that. And so she's freaking out, okay? And so she's calling her daughter, who happens to be my girlfriend. She's calling other people, and she's like, what do I do? Where do I go? And so they're trying to solutionize this situation. I don't even know if solutionize is a word, but you get what I'm saying, right? And they're trying to find a solution to this issue. And then all of a sudden she finds it, and then what does she do? She texts everybody. She calls everybody. She tells the entire family, I found it. Where was it? And then it goes on, and there's the story, right? Why? Because that visa is valuable, because it costs a lot of money to get a plane ticket to come from Jalapa, Mexico to the United States. And she wanted to see her family because her daughter here was going to get married and all those sorts of things. And so it was a big deal. And so here it is with God, who when they lose a person, that is valuable to them. It is like a widow losing her inheritance. And so when the widow gets it, and pulls it back, and she has her full finances again, so it is in heaven when a lost child of God comes back into the fold. But then Jesus says it's not even like that. Here's another story. And it continues on. Before we move on, let's go ahead and fill in some of these blanks. The shepherd and his sheep. Heaven rejoices more when one sinner repents than when 99 have no need. Now what we will realize is that all 99 have a need, right? But you get the point. The widow and her coin. There is more rejoicing when one lost person is found. And then it continues on with the story of the lost son and the faithful father. And it says this, to illustrate this point further, as if Jesus didn't already illustrate it enough, knowing that there were shepherds in the crowd understanding what a lost sheep meant, that there were women in the crowd understanding that when their husband dies or whatever, that lost coin means a lot to them. He's going to continue on and he's going to share another story. And it says this. It says, verse 11, to illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of the inheritance now, before you die. So his father agreed and divided his wealth between his sons. Now, just a little background about the culture. It's, the inheritance from a father was being passed down to sons, and there were 2 sons, and one says, Dad, I don't even want to wait for you to die. I just want the money now because I don't care about you that much. And I could do a lot better with the money. So that was the extent of the conversation. And so, as the father, he's like, well, I can't really pull this son back into the fold. He's too old. He can go off on his own. He can do what he wants. And he'll probably never see me again. And I get it. So I'll just go ahead and divide the inheritance now, and I'll give you what you want. Continues on, verse 13. A few days later, this younger man packed all of his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money on wild living. So everything that you can think of. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? I mean, I don't know what rock and roll looked like back then, but you get my point. Verse 14. About the time his money ran out, he lost all his friends. He lost all the things that he wanted. A great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. Realize that Israel is in this area of deserts, just like Arizona is in a desert. And so it's not uncommon for famine to happen. It's not uncommon for drought to happen. And here was a man who was not wise with his finances. He didn't store up a little bit so that he could have some means so that he could buy food and have drink while the famine went on. He was out of luck. And it was because he was stupid. And he's realizing, he's coming to his right mind during this famine, and he's like, I don't have any more money. Now I just need to survive. How am I going to survive? Continues on. Verse 15. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him. And the man sent him into the field to feed his pigs. Now, as a Jew, that is the swarthiest, that is the worst thing. I don't know why I'm using the word swarthy today, but it's the worst thing, the most disgusting job that you could ever have, because pigs were the lowliest of lowly animals. They were unclean. No Jew would ever associate or touch a pig if they were following God correctly, if they were following the law correctly. And so he realized that he was in a dire situation, and so here is this irreligious or non-Jewish farmer who said, I got pigs to feed, why don't you go ahead and feed them? And so here he goes to the lowliest position he could ever have in society, that is feeding pigs. Verse 16, the young man became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.' Even my dad's servants have a better life than me. I'm just going to go there. I'm going to grovel. My dad owes me nothing. He's already given me his inheritance. I thought he was as good as dead in my life, but I'm going to go back to him because I cannot survive. I'm going to starve. I'm going to just say, God, I'm just going to say, Dad, help me. I just want to hire, I'll be one of your servants." Continues on. So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. The dad was always looking for him. He always had an eye on that road, that maybe one day his son would come home. We'll start in verse 20 again. So he returned home to his father, and while he was a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. Just so you guys know, any person over the age of 35, it's undignified to run in that culture at that time. And realize that here is this father who's probably maybe in his 60s or something like that, right? In order to run, because he's got his garb on, he has to gird up his clothes and start running like a crazy man, okay? And realize that, imagine somebody like that in our culture today, right? It's just unheard of. They're undignified. But he didn't care because he was running after his son. And it continues on. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son." And his father said, "You're right. Get to work." No. He said, verse 22, but his father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his fingers and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening." Right? This is what the dad is saying. The dad is saying, get everything and give it back, give it to my son. And you know what? That calf that we've been fattening just for a great feast, we're going to kill it now, and we're going to feast on today. Continues on, "We must celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead and now has returned to life. He was lost but now is found." So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. Wow, so the older son was actually doing something. He was actually faithful to his father. And he's out in the fields, and you guys know the story, but I'll continue reading. When he returned home, he heard the music and the dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return." Now the servant is probably expressing this with happiness, and the older son, or the other son, the faithful son, is probably like, "What? My dad's never thrown a party for me like this. And there's dancing, and there's singing. There's all this stuff going on. What gives?" Verse 28, the older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. Who is Jesus liking this to? The Pharisees, the religious leaders at this time. They aren't going to go in and hang out with these sinners, because we've been faithful to God. For generations, my family has been faithful to God. How dare I hang out with those sinners? And here's Jesus saying, this is what makes heaven happiest. We're partying while you're on the outside. Continues on. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, "All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing that you told me to do. And in all the time you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering his money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. Realize he went a little low. He hit a low blow on his brother, the prostitutes, right? Continues on, verse 31. His father said to him, look, my dear son, you have always stayed with me. You've always been part of the 99. You were always part of the 9 coins. You've always stayed with me. And your joy and my joy has always been together. We've always had a great family together. And your joy has been my joy. Verse 32, and we had to celebrate this day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now is found. I skipped a portion too, and it said this, in verse 31, it says, and everything I have is yours. Realize that there is this idea of faithfulness, and there's this idea of inheritance and reward. As followers of Jesus Christ, we get an inheritance, and that is eternal life, but we also get reward for faithfully following the Lord. And God sees that and will reward us. And here is what the Father is saying. The Father is saying, realize all his money has been squandered. Everything I have now is yours. It's going to be turned over to you. But my son, your brother, was lost and now is found. Imagine being in that situation when Jesus shared that story with these men, these religious leaders, these teachers of the law, and also the disciples, and also all these sinners that were probably hanging out with Jesus at the time. This was revolutionary. Because Jesus, who is God, who came from eternity, is articulating this big idea. And the big idea is this. Heaven is happiest when dead people become alive, when lost are found, because no matter how distant or rejected anyone here is on earth, God values them like a shepherd his sheep, a widow her coin, and a father his son. Let me read that again. Heaven is happiest when the dead become alive and the lost are found. Because no matter how distant or rejected anyone here is on earth, God values them like a shepherd his sheep, a widow her coin, and a father his son. You see, the religious leaders saw those people, those sinners, those tax collectors, as traitors and rebellious against God, and they deserve what? Punishment. They don't deserve anything from us. This is the way Jesus saw them, and this is the way heaven sees them. Heaven sees them like a shepherd and a lost sheep. And everybody in that crowd said, yeah, everybody, every shepherd, any good shepherd worth his paying dues would go out and get that sheep and bring it back. Any widow that is in her right mind would go and find that coin and bring it back. And any father would always have that eye on that road waiting for his son to come back and to take him in as his own. So why wouldn't heaven do the same thing? Why wouldn't God the Father do the same thing? That's what Jesus is trying to get at these religious leaders. I understand that you've been faithful, but my ministry has not been to you guys. It's been to seek and save those who were lost, that they might be found. And if those religious leaders thought deeply enough, they would also realize that they too are the rebellious son, and that God's grace has been great to them. So here are some thoughts, here are some questions that we can bring home and that we can look at our own lives. My question to you and me when I look at this passage is this: am I happiest when heaven is happiest? And my truthful answer is sometimes. Sometimes I am happiest when heaven is happiest, but sometimes I want things for myself. Sometimes I would prefer to have a nice church that's comfortable as opposed to people who would come in and they deserve to be here because Jesus wants them here, but they might ruffle some feathers. It's easier to hang out with people that I want to hang out with than people who need Jesus. And that gets to the second question. Are we more satisfied when holy people hang out or when sinners find Christ? That means me getting out of my comfort zone and me interacting with my neighbors and me interacting with people that are outside of this community or the seminary community that I'm a part of or other Christian communities that I'm a part of, and developing relationships with those people and hanging out with them. Are you willing to expand your circle? Am I willing to say, you know what, people that I hang out with, that's good and well, they're encouraging to me, but I also need to expand it out to people who need to know Jesus, who need good influence. Now, this is what I'm not saying. I'm not saying go out and start hanging out with people and let them influence you negatively. I'm not saying that. If you have struggles or if you have desires and you start hanging out with those people and they start negatively influencing you, that's no good. But if you can expand your circle a little bit, beyond the walls of maybe this church, or beyond the walls of your Christian community, or beyond the walls of wherever that is, start embracing people. And what's been really cool is we as a congregation have been able to do that by giving to Open Arms Care Center, by giving the shoeboxes, by seeing that people come to Christ. And when we do that, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see broken lives mended. Some of you might know this, some of you might not. I've done martial arts for quite some time, and working here and also working on my doctorate a little bit. It's been difficult to engage in that, but I have a community of people who I do martial arts with. And recently there was a couple who wanted me to renew their vows, and so I was happy to do that, and I was able to interact with them. I would have never interacted with them otherwise, other than just hanging out maybe at the gym when I go, just very occasionally, or whatever. But I was able to interact with them, and it was really cool having these conversations. Able to get on the Bible, able to talk about Jesus with them, able to do a lot of different things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I wasn't looking for that opportunity. That opportunity just came about. But this is what happened. In the midst of that situation, I was able to, just totally unbeknownst to me, I was able to be salt and light to those people. And it had a positive effect on them. And I think that made heaven happy. And so my question to you today is, as followers of Jesus Christ, how can you make heaven happy by being a blessing to those around you? Some of you already know those people that you either have been reaching out to, or hopefully you prayerfully pray for an opportunity to be able to reach out to them. Some of you maybe don't have that right now, and so I would just encourage you, God, to pray this prayer of, God, just open up my eyes to those people who need you, because I want to make heaven happy. And in so doing, when we make heaven happy, we become happy. Why? Because we have the Spirit of God in us. And when the Spirit of God rejoices, we can't help but have joy in our life. So my question to you is this: how can we make heaven happy this week? Who can we reach out to? What can we do so that we can bring broken people and so that they can become mended? So that we can make what we would maybe classify as sinners back into the fold. So that all of heaven would rejoice. And so that we can have people in the kingdom of God. Would you pray with me?